Today's video is brought to you by Ground News. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about an offer exclusive to my audience that I think that you will be interested in. Also, these are longer tail, more researched pieces that I do, a little longer in length. If you like this kind of content from me, I would ask that you like, comment, subscribe to the channel, but also share this content as a way to get it out there to see more eyes and, signal to me that this is something that you would like to see more of. It is a little different than my normal headline-driven thing, and I would appreciate your support. All right. He's back, or more like he never really left. Despite whatever relief we may have taken from having narrowly avoided his re-election last year, make no mistake, like a bad STD, the scourge and fire of Donald J. Trump's political career can't be completely wiped out with an antibiotic alone. Even after being hurled from his perch in Twitter, this honey-baked ham of a man has landed softly in the muck of Parler, Gab, and Newsmax TV. And true to its brand, Trumpism thrives in the filthy sphere of influence that is digital right-wing politics. And while he's always craved the spotlight, his Royal Highness King Turd of Shit Mountain may actually do more harm in the darkness outside of the full scrutiny of the public eye. Some of you may be thinking, why in the name of God would Diaper Load Donnie want to return to power? For someone so desperate to be loved, his legacy will always be considered one of, if not the most, controversial presidencies in history. He even hated living in the dump at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So yeah, it's fair to ask, why would he want to go back? Maybe 260 rounds of golf in 4 years made him sick of the game. And now he can't ease into the life most Florida retirees enjoy by keeping to themselves and working on getting out of the sand trap. There's also the fact that he has very little left to lose and everything to gain. He's also chasing relevancy, the main currency for all public figures. Trust me, if I could mainline your likes, comments, and subscribes, I would do it. And Trump is most certainly jonesing for some praise because for a supposed genius of self-promotion, his newly launched blog is putting up rookie numbers in terms of engagement. You might chalk that up to the social media companies finally growing a little bit of a backbone, even though Facebook may drop its ban on Trump's accounts later this year. Regardless of all of that, like warts on the taint of society, more and more right-wing boot-licking clout chasers like Dan Bongino, Josh Hawley, and Tommy Lahren are popping up ready and willing to spread the Diet Coke doofus gospel, which could set the stage for a return to glory. And before I get into another of his reasons to get back into the fight, I want to take a moment to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Ground News. There is strength in diversity. I've said it a million times. The best theories and the best thinkers are the ones that have approached their subject matter from all angles, incorporating the viewpoints of others into their own thinking. With the Dollemore Daily, I do, admittedly, have a bias, but I am constantly challenging my ideals, honing my understanding of a story or topic by collecting as much information as I can find. This is a work in progress that has taken me from being a rank-and-file Republican through to some semblance of libertarianism and into the land of the blue. Because I'm a Democrat, but I have only achieved that resolve through challenging views that I once held on high. Ground News is an important new tool for challenging your perspective on a current topic. An apolitical news comparison platform. Ground News empowers readers with an immense library of more than 50,000 news outlets from all over the world and across the political spectrum. I mean, it was founded by a former NASA engineer, so you gotta know they've done their homework. The app enables you to test your grasp of a given story by presenting you with a full array of sources reporting on the story, making it easier to see the full picture. The game changer is their news blind spot feature, which enables you to check your own blind spot and see stories that aren't being reported by one side of the political spectrum. Stories that you would otherwise miss inside your bubble. Ground News allows you to see a story from all its angles so you can better inform your conclusions. Awareness of our differences is ultimately what will unite us. Awareness will make us all stronger. Strengthen your perspective by considering the perspective of others. Click on my link in the description below, ground.news/Dollemore, to download the free Ground News app and see what the future of news looks like. All right, now back to another reason for Trump to get back into the fight. The oldest and most resonant of all for Trump, cold, hard cash. There are still a lot of questions about what this racist conman Hall of Famer's finances really look like, but with the wrinkled teat of his family's inheritance officially sucked dry in 2018, Trump is going to need to start earning a buck. He can always go back to hawking grade D beef and cologne that I can only imagine smells like McDonald's food, slow-cooked in a dead guy's boot found somewhere in a dumpster out behind a strip club that features a high noon all-you-can-eat buffet. But the lucrative book deals and speaking tours that typically follow a stint in the White House are probably more appealing. Yet the most troubling thing at stake here, and the most coveted reward of all for Trump, is power. The former molester-in-chief doesn't need to be railing lines of Adderall off of George Washington's old nightstand to do plenty of damage. In fact, it has taken the GOP a shockingly short period of time to institute draconian voter restrictions in Texas, Florida, and Georgia in order to prevent their death grip on our democracy's windpipe from loosening any more than it did in 2020. But I'm sure there's nothing Trump wants more than another shot at the big time so he can prove once and for all to all the losers and haters just how much America loves and needs him. Much like Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, both in looks and personality, Trump is the wretched villain we can't get rid of. Sad as it may be, Republicans are just as hacky as the writers of that franchise, recycling the same reliable brand of fear-mongering because they've run out of other ideas for how to appeal to Americans. Never mind that their brand is killing us. Right now, the victims are mostly contained to members of the hatchet wound that is the Republican Party, but like any gross open sore, letting it fester only gives room for it to spread. Indeed, Trump has already hollowed out the minds of many Republicans who seem willing to follow him anywhere, like the world's fattest Pied Piper, and after 4 years in power, that's starting to take a toll on the party as a whole. Prominent members of the GOP like Mitt Romney and the Bush family are being shellacked by Trump and his supporters who want them to sit in the back seat and let the MAGA vibes take the wheel. The first domino to fall was Liz Cheney, recently stripped of her leadership role by her fellow party members in the House. They're not debating why. It's squarely because Cheney voted for Trump's impeachment and roundly rejects Trump's lie that the 2020 election was stolen from him. And bringing things full circle, Trump loyalist Elise Stefanik replaced Cheney as the party's conference chair. And other Republican critics of the former president have been put on notice to watch their P's and their Q's or else face the wrath of the MAGA mob. This comes as no surprise. Trump also signals his distaste for dynastic rule in American politics, unless, of course, we're talking about his own family. Removing other big names from the Republican Party is just a continuation of his whole drain the swamp bravado. And it's the best way for Trump to assert his own unquestioned dominance over the party, since establishing the gold-plated Trump dynasty was always the goal. Republican representatives like Liz Cheney, who were once considered prime sources of batshit right-wing nonsense, are finding themselves being out-crazied. I mean, this is Liz Cheney we're talking about, a woman who accused Obama of supporting jihadists when photos of American soldiers torturing prisoners were released. And hey, now, torture is a Cheney family tradition, one Liz fought to reinstate with the Trump White House. So I understand why she's miffed. But what does this mean for the GOP? It means that their base has been radicalized by Trump. They believe the bogus claims peddled by their leader that are backed up by his bootlicking underlings. And no one really knows where that leaves historically prominent Republicans. Some former officials are murmuring about breaking off and forming a new party. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one. What is clear, though, is that the GOP is splitting from its traditionalist past in favor of an isolationist, nativist, protectionist, and above all, Trumpist present and future. Depending on how that strategy plays out will determine whether, as many have claimed, the Republican Party is now the party of Trump. The irony here is while Teflon Don might be uncancelable for the toxic waste he vomits into our public discourse, there are some checks his puckered butthole of a mouth has written that his planetoid ass can't avoid having to cash. Dodging 2 impeachments is no small feat, but the legal minefield he's currently standing in could end up being his downfall. It would be far more satisfying to see his political opponents overwhelm him through an all-out unified assault. But what's more likely, though, is that we'll watch him thrash around like a wild hog caught in a barbed wire fence, slowly bleeding to death from 1,000 little cuts made by the astounding number of cases against him. I say astounding because it's truly impressive that one person can be so prolific and creative in terms of how they abuse the law. I mean, where do we start? In March, the Washington Post had the counts at 29 lawsuits pending against him. Though, by the time you watch this, God knows Trump might strangle a puppy or check to see which crimes he hasn't committed and find a way to do them so he can check them off a list like a bird watcher. But, for crimes. For a guy who faced an estimated 4,000 cases in his life, what's another dozen misdemeanors or even a felony or 3? Currently, he faces accusations of lying about the value of his hotel sites, scamming investors into buying into bogus business ventures, and overcharging his own inauguration committee. Tenants of his properties claim he hit them with phony rent invoices, and guests of his hotels are taking him to court over the disgusting and dangerous conditions of his establishments. Even his own niece says he defrauded her of her inheritance. But that doesn't even begin to get into the juicy stuff. 2 different members of Congress are suing Donald Trump for rounding up his personal meth head militia to storm the Capitol building in January. The NAACP are arguing his attempts to overturn the election results violate the Voting Rights Act and the Ku Klux Klan Act. And former White House counsel Don McGahn will no longer be able to ignore a House subpoena to testify about obstructing the Mueller investigation. And of course, there's former Apprentice contestant Summer Zervos and Elle magazine columnist E. Jean Carroll. They've both accused Trump of sexual assault and have so far successfully prevented him from getting their defamation cases dismissed after he called their claims hoaxes and publicly attacked their character. But most troubling of all to old 45 are probably the efforts of Manhattan DA Cyrus Vance Jr., who's investigating claims of business and tax fraud, who was just joined in his lawsuit by the New York Attorney General Letitia James. Few career criminals have the kind of record of dodging the long arm of the law that the former president has. But even legendary outlaw Al Capone, who never faced the music for all the murder and mayhem he presided over, ended up dying in prison after the feds came after his finances. And Vance scored a huge victory in that regard in February when the Supreme Court finally forced Trump to hand over his tax returns. And on top of that, the former daughter-in-law of Trump's longtime CFO Alan Weisselberg provided a boatload of documents recently. This has many observers hypothesizing that Weisselberg will soon flip on his boss. And the fallout from that would be something to behold. Or, in other words, the best is yet to come! And as for Trump's crack legal defense team, the ones who are probably congregating at a local hardware store or landscaping business to plan the strategy as we speak, well, I'm sure there's plenty of rosé-soaked suburban soccer moms like Marissa Carone for them to call as their star witnesses. They may want to focus on getting their own houses in order. Former Trump lawyer Sidney Powell released the Kraken only to have it turn against her, as she faces a suit that claims she used funds from her nonprofit to pay her personal legal expenses. Now, I can't speak to what it feels like to have my dick in a vice grip, or more accurately for Trump, based on the size of his hands, in a pair of needle-nose pliers. But given his brazen willingness to constantly put himself in legal jeopardy, maybe it's kind of a fetish that's at least more satisfying than being peed on. Basically, there's a whole lot of radioactivity still floating around in the air, and just where those particles land depends on a lot of factors. But what we do know is that by challenging the election results and insisting that it was rigged, has emerged as the galvanizing event for coronating Trump as the godhead of the GOP. Doing so is reckless and dangerous for our democracy, but it might be working. In a recent Reuters poll, 60% of Republicans believe the voter fraud lies. In the past, denying the truth of events has proved a winning strategy for ramping up momentum in favor of embattled candidates. This is exactly what Hitler and the Nazis did in the wake of World War I, leveraging the myth spread by German militarists and diplomats that Germany didn't lose the war militarily, but were instead betrayed by socialists, communists, liberals, and Jews. The Nazis attempted a coup in Bavaria in 1923 known as the Beer Hall Putsch. This has been likened by many journalists and historians to the attempted coup on January 6th. The Beer Hall Putsch didn't result in Hitler's rise to power at that time, as he was briefly imprisoned for his actions. However, he emerged with hardly a slap on the wrist and became more powerful than ever. Just how popular? Well, we know what happened in the 30s. And if you don't, you're probably not too familiar with the expression about those who don't know their history being doomed to repeat it. Trump hasn't been locked up since the insurrection, just relegated to his McXanadu fortress in Florida. A great place to slam some Big Macs and plot his return to the main stage. Could the election lie be the wave he rides in 2024 back to the White House? Stronger than ever? He's counting on it, that's for sure. And so are Republicans. Whether or not Trump is the name on the ticket, there is no doubt that whoever they offer up will be pushing Trumpism all day, every day. Sadly, Trump the man and Trump the concept could win another election. And there's no silver bullet to prevent that. So Democrats better tighten up and get ready for a bumpy midterm where if they lose just 5 House seats, they lose the majority. As individuals, our best defense against the second wave of Trumpism is to vote it out and, if possible, get others to join you. If you really believe in democracy, then use your power to defend its integrity.